The night before the battle, the Roman camp was silent. Suspenseful, not peaceful, silent. There's a difference. Peace belongs to men who believe tomorrow is guaranteed. Silence belongs to men who know it is not. Beyond the campfires stretched a sea of darkness. Somewhere in that darkness waited thousands of enemy warriors, men carrying steel, men carrying hatred, men carrying orders to kill. And yet, while younger soldiers stared into the flames, wondering whether they would survive the coming dawn, the Roman general sat calmly beneath the dim glow of an oil lamp. No panic, no complaints, no self-pity, no desperate prayers for easier circumstances. Only preparation, only focus, only duty. Curious, the question is why? Why did Roman generals seem almost immune to the emotional storms that destroy ordinary men? Why did they remain composed while kingdoms collapsed, armies mutinied, and death marched toward them with every campaign?
And perhaps more importantly, what did they understand about life that most modern men never will? Because history reveals a strange pattern. The men who carried the greatest burdens often complained the least, while those carrying the lightest burdens complained the most. At first glance, this makes no sense. But buried inside Roman philosophy, military culture, and the psychology of leadership lies an answer so powerful that it can transform the way you face every challenge in your own life. To find it, we must begin with the truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The Romans expected suffering. Modern people expect comfort. That single difference changes everything. Imagine standing on the northern frontier of the empire. Cold rain falls from a gray sky. Mud swallows your boots. Food is scarce. Disease spreads through camp. Enemy tribes wait beyond the forests. Every sunrise could be your last. This was not an extraordinary day. This was a normal day for Roman soldiers and generals alike. Hardship was not an interruption of life. Hardship was life. Most men today become angry when reality refuses to match their expectations. The Romans solved this problem differently. They lowered the expectation, not their standards, their expectations. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote something remarkable. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people you deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Most people hear those words and think they sound pessimistic. They are wrong. They are practical. Because disappointment comes from expecting reality to be something it is not. Marcus prepared himself for difficulty before difficulty arrived. The Roman generals did the same, and that raises a disturbing question. How much of your suffering comes from the event itself? And how much comes from your refusal to accept that difficult events are part of life? The Roman answer was clear. Accept reality first, then act. Never reverse the order. This sounds simple. It is not. Because human nature rebels against reality, human beings want comfort, certainty, control, security. The Romans understood that none of those things were guaranteed. And when a man truly understands that, something extraordinary happens. Complaining begins to lose its power. After all, why complain about a storm if storms are part of nature? Why complain about hardship if hardship is part of existence? Why complain about death if death awaits every man? The Roman general was not fearless. He was realistic, and realism creates resilience. But there was another reason Roman leaders rarely complained, one that reveals an uncomfortable truth about modern psychology. Complaining makes a man feel powerful for a moment. It creates the illusion that he has identified the problem, the illusion that he is doing something, the illusion that he is fighting back. But in reality, complaining often becomes a substitute for action. The Romans hated substitutes, especially substitutes for responsibility. Consider Julius Caesar. Before becoming one of history's greatest military leaders, he faced disasters that would have broken most men. Political enemies hunted him. Pirates captured him. Assassination threats followed him constantly. Military campaigns pushed him to the edge of destruction. Yet history records something remarkable. Again and again, Caesar responded to crisis not with emotional outbursts, but with decisions. Action became his language. This is one of the greatest lessons hidden inside Roman leadership. Most men use emotion to process difficulty. Great leaders use responsibility. The moment something goes wrong, ordinary people ask, why is this happening to me? Roman generals asked, what must be done next? The difference appears small. It is enormous. One question produces helplessness. The other produces action, and action is the enemy of despair. The Roman military understood something psychologists now confirm centuries later. The human mind suffers most when it feels powerless. Complaining reinforces powerlessness. Action destroys it. Even small action, especially small action. This is why Roman commanders constantly emphasize discipline. Discipline creates movement. Movement creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates resilience. And resilience creates leaders. But perhaps the most surprising reason Roman generals rarely complained had nothing to do with war. It had everything to do with identity. Most people think behavior creates identity. The Romans believed identity creates behavior. A Roman general did not ask whether he felt strong. He asked whether his actions reflected who he was supposed to be. Duty came before emotion. Character came before comfort. Responsibility came before preference. This mindset shaped every decision. Imagine standing before your army. Thousands of soldiers watch your every movement. They study your face, your posture, your voice, your reactions. If you panic, they panic. The general understood something most modern men forget. Leadership is contagious, but so is weakness. Every emotional reaction spreads. Every habit spreads. Every standard spreads. Most people spend years trying to control circumstances. The Stoics focused on controlling perception. This became one of Rome's most powerful psychological weapons. Because external events remain unpredictable, internal interpretation remains yours. The enemy attacks. A storm destroys supplies. A trusted ally betrays you. A campaign fails. These events happen. The question becomes, what story will you tell yourself about them? Roman generals understood that victory often begins with narrative, not public narrative. Private narrative, the conversation inside your own mind. This is where most battles are won or lost, long before swords clash. Every excuse spreads. The Roman general could not afford the luxury of emotional collapse, because his emotions belong not only to him, they belong to everyone following him. Think about that. How many people are watching you right now? Perhaps your children, perhaps your friends, perhaps your coworker, perhaps nobody. Yet even then, another observer remains. You and the standards you tolerate become the standards you live by. This is why Roman culture placed enormous emphasis on self-command. Not because controlling emotions was easy, because it was necessary. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that events themselves do not disturb us. Our judgments about events disturb us. Long before armies move, long before history remembers the outcome. The internal battle decides the external one. And this leads us to a lesson many modern men desperately need. Most people believe confidence comes before action. History suggests otherwise. Confidence usually follows action. Roman generals did not wait until they felt brave. They acted while afraid. They acted while uncertain. They acted while exhausted. They acted while facing impossible odds. Then confidence appeared. Not because circumstances improved, because evidence accumulated. Each difficult action became proof. Proof that they could endure. Proof that they could adapt. Proof that they could survive. And evidence is stronger than motivation. Motivation disappears, evidence remains. This is why Roman military training was so brutal. The purpose was not merely physical strength, the purpose was psychological certainty. A soldier who survives hardship begins to trust himself. A leader who repeatedly faces difficulty begins to trust himself even more. Trust becomes courage, courage becomes composure, composure becomes leadership, and leadership changes history. Yet there is another reason Roman generals rarely complained, one that strikes directly at the heart of modern culture. They understood mortality, not intellectually, personally. Every campaign reminded them of death. Every battlefield displayed death. Every funeral reinforced death. Every aging scar whispered the same message: time is limited. Today, many people live as though life is infinite. Tomorrow feels guaranteed. Next year feels guaranteed. Another opportunity feels guaranteed. The Romans knew better. Memento mori. Remember that you must die. This phrase was not designed to create fear. It was designed to create urgency. A man who remembers death complains less about inconvenience, because inconvenience is not the real enemy. Wasted life is. Imagine two men. One believes he has endless time. The other knows time is running out. Which man values his days more? Which man acts more decisively? Which man tolerates fewer excuses? The answer is obvious. And this is why Roman generals often appeared calm in situations that terrified everyone else. They had already accepted the ultimate outcome, death. Once a man stops pretending he can avoid mortality forever, something strange happens. Many lesser fears lose their power. The fear of embarrassment, the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of discomfort. They begin shrinking because compared to death, they are small. This does not make a man reckless. It makes him focused. And focus creates strength. Now consider the battlefield. Steel collides, war horns echo, dust rises beneath thousands of marching feet. Men scream, horses crash through formations, shields splinter, chaos consumes the landscape. And somewhere inside that storm stands the Roman commander, not because he enjoys danger, because duty demands presence. Modern culture often teaches people to pursue happiness. The Romans pursued virtue. That distinction matters. Happiness depends on conditions. Virtue depends on choices. Conditions change constantly. Choices remain available, even in disaster, especially in disaster. This is why Roman leaders focused less on outcomes and more on conduct. Victory matters, but character matters more, because outcomes are partly outside your control. Character is not. And when character becomes the priority, complaints become irrelevant. The question is no longer what happened. The question becomes, how will I respond? That is where power lives. Not in circumstances, not in luck, not in comfort. In response. This is the secret hidden beneath Roman greatness. Not military superiority, not political dominance, not wealth. Response. The ability to meet reality without surrendering to it. Marcus Aurelius practiced it. Julius Caesar practiced it. Scipio Africanus practiced it. Countless forgotten commanders practiced it. And every one of them left behind the same lesson. Life does not become easier, you become stronger. Most men spend years trying to rearrange the world. The Romans focused on rearranging themselves. That is why they endured. That is why they conquered. That is why their philosophy still survives long after their empire vanished. And perhaps now we can answer the question from the beginning. Why did Roman generals never complain even when facing death? Because they understood something most men never learn. Complaining cannot change reality. Discipline can. Complaining cannot create courage. Action can. Complaining cannot build character. Responsibility can. They understood that suffering is inevitable. Weakness is optional. That hardship is guaranteed. Self-pity is not. That fear is natural. Cowardice is a choice. And above all, they understood that the greatest victory is not over an enemy. It is over yourself. The man who masters himself cannot be easily defeated. Not by circumstances. Not by criticism. Not by setbacks. Not even by fear, because he carries his strength internally. And that strength travels with him everywhere. Into storms, into battles, into uncertainty, into darkness, into history. So the next time life becomes difficult, remember the Roman general sitting quietly beneath the glow of an oil lamp on the night before battle. Remember that he felt fear, but acted anyway. Remember that he faced uncertainty, but moved forward anyway. Remember that he knew death was possible, but fulfilled his duty anyway. And ask yourself a question that echoes across 2,000 years of history. Will you complain about the challenge, or will you become the kind of person the challenge cannot break? If this lesson changed how you think, carry it forward into the next hardship you face. Because every difficulty offers the same choice that confronted Roman generals, Stoic philosophers, emperors, and warriors throughout history. You can curse reality, or you can command yourself. And in the end, the men remembered by history were never those who demanded easier roads. They were the ones who became strong enough to walk through any road placed before them,